fictitious and a counterfeit that was going on at the time. Now, if you read the previous verses, he talked about the three things that early in the first chapter, he's saying there are three things that we have to pay attention to. One is the faith, love, and hope. You know, it is by faith that you have turned away from serving the idols. By faith, faith was not something, it was a leap into the darkness. Faith is something, leap into the light. So you are brought from a darkness to light so that you can now reflect that light onto others. That is by faith. By faith you have turned away from idols. Second, the love. It is the love by which you are now serving the true living God. You know, that is the love that he is talking about. Finally, is the hope of coming of Christ. You know, we are living with the hope that one day we shall see. Without the hope, life is miserable. If people commit suicide, then there is no hope. When they thought they are end of the rope, because they have lost, they do not know that you can live with the hope. So that is the hope that he is talking about, the hope that Christ will reappear again. So faith, love, and hope, how he uses among these Gentiles to bring about Christ's kingdom. And to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, which delivered us from the wrath to come. And he's talking about the hope of who? The Son from heaven, whom God has raised from dead, which delivered us from the wrath to come. The wrath that he is talking about for our misdeeds, our sin, See, the wrath is in a spiritual realm, Spiritually you are so corrupt, that it needed a justification or the wrath means judgment. And the only judgment that God could have for a sin is separate himself from the sinner. That's how Adam got separated from God. Adam didn't die from sin, but he was distanced or separated from God. But God says, God's love endureth forever. It endures in spite of what you are doing. It still bears. Endures means bear. His love is so deep, he still bears what you are doing. But because of that love which endureth, he wanted to find a solution. How can I reclaim you? How can I reconcile for what you have done? Although for every deed there is a judgment. But I want to save you. You do not know what you are doing. And that saving grace came from Christ. He put everything upon Jesus Christ because the decree was in God's eyes that you have to pay the penalty. The penalty in those days, olden times, was, you take a lamb to the mountain, every year and sacrifice the lamb, and you think that you are cleansed for the next 364 days, and when comes the following year, the same day, you come back again with another lamb. This became sort of a ritual among Jews that they never understood the deeper meaning of what it meant. He says, God wanted these commandments for them to follow. So it is not, it is for them to bring them on the right path. Okay? But they kept on doing the same thing. That's not what he meant. He says, isn't obedience better than sacrifice? Why do you keep sacrificing animals? If you are obedient to me and my words, you don't have to do this. Unfortunately, Jews of the time, at that time, did not understand even the message of Christ. Yesterday we were talking about what does God require of us? He requires, in Micah 6:8 says, I don't require your sacrifices. I don't require your sacrifices of lambs and rivers of oil and sacrifice of your children. You know how Abraham wanted to give. None of those I want. All I want is to live justly, be merciful to others. In other words, be compassionate to others and walk humbly before God. If Jews had paid attention to these, they need not have to go through all these commandments. See, they were so legalistic in their minds. For them, you cannot do anything on the Sabbath. You know, they would in fact punish those who did something on Sabbath. But Jesus said, how hypocrites you are, you know. If someone is suffering on a Sabbath, would you save him or would you help him? Or would you just let him die? You know. So Jesus showed the compassionate part of him, you know, that was totally, this was radically different than what Jews had all the while thinking about. They wanted to go by the books. They were so legalistic, they forgot that what their conscience was telling. Instead they were looking at the book. No, Sabbath we don't have to do anything. That's what the commandment says. Jesus himself gives an example to them. You fools, do you realize when David was hungry one time, there was a bread, consecrated bread. He says, I'm hungry, I want to have food. The Levite said, yes, there is a bread, but it is offering for God. Nobody should eat it. What did David do? David ate it, right? Did he die? No. See, that shows the compassionate part of God. See, they were so legalistic, you know, you can't eat that bread. No, but David was so hungry, you know, he kept David alive. The point is that sometimes, you know, when you follow these commands and not understanding the deeper meaning, why it is there, and we have totally lost, you know, what we are following. And that's what Jesus was trying to tell through parables and through the stories. The wonderful parables, it is not just as some story or something that he is telling you, but it has a much deeper meaning to it. Let's turn to verse chapter 2, continue on chapter 2. For yourself, brethren, know our entrance in unto you, that it was not in vain. You see, our coming to you was not in vain. It has a purpose. You know, it was not empty. You know, it was not empty promises. You know, so our visit was to bear the fruit of the seeds that we have sown in the past. Even after that we had suffered before and were shamefully entreated, as you know, at Philippi. We were bold in our God to speak unto you the gospel of God with much contention. He is telling them, look, we were shamefully entreated, as you know, in Philippi. Apparently this was written right after Philippians. In Philippi, they were thrown into jail. Who were thrown into jail? Paul, Silas, and Timothy were arrested, and they were put in jail without any trial, and they were beaten and thrown into jail. You know, as a Roman citizens, Paul was a Roman. This treatment was illegal. You know, he says, despite all these sufferings that we went through, he says, we are even become bolder in proclaiming the gospel of God with much contention. That has not dissuaded us. That has not sort of made us feel that this is not worth it. You know, these beatings that we are going through, it's not worth it for the sake of this gospel. Why should we get thrown into jail? He says, no. That has strengthened our faith to the point that we are willing to go forward, not backward. So they came with a great boldness in spite of what went through in the previous days when they were thrown in jail. For our exhortation